You can keep your cameras on or off, but as long as you're on mute, and I'm happy to have everyone unmute themselves for questions later on. So welcome to everyone. Thank you for coming to this panel. Today, let's continue the recording. So this session is part of the Skoll World Forum's Ecosystem Day, but it's wholly created by the Lotus Flower and hosted by the Lotus Flower. And the Lotus Flower, we support women and girls impacted by conflict and displacement. We help them heal, learn and grow through our community centres in refugee camps, and we implement projects aligned to SDG goals and work under 3 pillars, which is education, livelihoods, health and safety, and peace building and human rights. So in tandem with Skoll's Face Forward theme, our panel will explore the urgent need to make giving smarter in future and address the effectiveness of philanthropy and ways in which charities and NGOs can maximise the impact generated by available funds. Today, we're joined by a wonderful panel, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves, but I'll briefly introduce them. So we have with us Atalanti Moquette, the founder of Giving Women. We have Sophie Pelka, co-creator of Give It Forward Trust, GIFT, and Vian Ahmed, the regional director of the Lotus Flower. So I'm going to give the floor to Atalanti. Atalanti?
Yep, I'm here. Hi, so I'm Atalanti Moquette. I'm the founder of Giving Women, which is a community of women mainly based in Switzerland, but we have one of our members who's based in London now, Ruth, who's also connected with the Lotus Flower. And the role of Giving Women is to bring women together to support programs which are working for improving the lives of girls and women in need. So if you want to hear more about how we do this, you can go on our website, but I don't want to waste our time on that.
Thank you so much, Atalanti. Sophie, if you can give us an introduction, that would be great.
Thank you, Taban. It's a real pleasure to be here at this Skoll Ecosystem event alongside great panelists. So thank you for the opportunity. So my name is Sophie Pelka. My professional background is in finance. I worked for 10 years in London in investment bank and private equity. I then took a long career break to raise my 4 children here in Switzerland. And in 2020, I co-created alongside 2 partners the Give It Forward Trust, GIFT. We're a small foundation hosted by Swiss Philanthropy Foundation, an umbrella foundation created in 2006. Our mission is very simple: transform lives one at a time. Our vision, we envision a world where everyone gets a chance to lead a self-directed, fulfilling life. Our belief is that where you're born on day one, and luck plays a very large role in people's lives. Our goal is to give forward some of the good luck we've had in our lives and careers to those in need of a second chance. And how we do that is by having a portfolio approach. We build and manage a portfolio of high social impact organizations. And lastly, our focus is on empowering girls and women across 2 pillars, education and rights and protection.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Sophie. Rianne, do you want to give a brief introduction about work on the ground?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Taban. My name is Vian Ahmed. I work as a regional director for the Lotus Flower organization. I'm based in Iraq, Kurdistan region in Dhaka city. I have been working with Lotus Flower since 2016, but I have almost 8 years experiences in humanitarian leadership and women empowerment. And as Taban mentioned, that at Lotus Flower, we have many programs that we target vulnerable women and girls and their families inside refugees and IDP camps. Our programs are aligned with sustainable development goals, and through these programs, and since 2016, we have been able to target thousands of women and girls and their families. I'm very glad to be here today, and I hope we'll be having some fruitful discussions around philanthropy, and for me to share some information about challenges we face as local implementers in this regard. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vian. So I'm going to jump right in and ask the title of the forum today, which is the question of what is smart philanthropy to you? And maybe I'll go to Sophie first, if you can answer that.
Sure. So philanthropic giving is increasing, which is great news, but so are the challenges it intends to address. And I think there's an urgency to question the effectiveness of such giving and reflect on how to further maximize the positive impact it can have. For me, there are 4 key components to a strategic philanthropy. Number 1 is a well-defined strategy. You need to start with your belief and your value, what you want to see the world, how you want to see the world evolve. Number 2, and we feel very strongly about this at GIFT, it's multi-year unrestricted funding. Multi-year funding, we want philanthropy to address our societal challenges that require systemic change. Change is messy, change is chaotic, it takes time, and we need to provide patient capital. It's a little bit like in the investment world. You find a good investment, you keep with it. Unrestricted, we're not specialists, we're not on the ground. I think that knowledge of how to really transform people's lives sits with the locals on the ground, and we need to find those grassroots organizations that actually change the world we live in. Number 3 is a partnership. We need to transform this relationship between donor and grantee. It's a power relationship, and that's not the way to go. For me, it really is about creating and nurturing a trusting relationship. We're partners in this. I think the value of philanthropy really sits not with the money we give, but with the work that's done locally. And it's all about managing unpredictability and adapting and learning together. And my last point is be an engaged donor. There's so much more to philanthropy than writing a check, but that's really Atalanti's, she's the star in that domain, so I'll let her speak to it. But these are really the 4 key components that I would say need to happen for a strategic and a smarter philanthropy.
Brilliant, thank you. And Atalanti, would you be able to add to that, please?
Yes, and I think Sophie, I wanted Sophie to go first because I think she really identified the really important key components for the almost the technical side of philanthropy, what needs to be in place, but at the same time respectful of the beneficiaries and how we're doing the work. It's so nice to see 2 old past projects here. I see Seth from Operation Fistula is there, and I think Heidi from World Women's Women's Voices Now. So it's really exciting to see people that we work with attending this event. So for me, one of the things, and I wanted to carry on from what Sophie was saying, I think as a philanthropist, you need to have a clear direction of what you can't do everything. Well, none of us can do everything. So we really need to go with our passion. What is the area that we really think we would like to make a difference? Or where is there a gap? And that's exactly when I started with Giving Women. The idea had come from somebody else, and they said, how about women helping women? But I needed to see, is there really a gap there? And indeed, there is a massive gap. And there's not enough philanthropic money actually going to women and girls in need. So that was something so there was a passion there, but again, there was also the research around it to identify what really needed to be done. So I think that one of the things I think that's very important is to be focused. You need to be focused in your philanthropy. Sophie said that they had identified 2 pillars this year that their philanthropy was going to look at. I think Sophie was absolutely right. We have to have a long-term look. Change doesn't happen in a year. So giving a grant of a year is not going to make a difference. But the one thing I wanted to talk about also is some of the values that as a philanthropist, we must always keep in mind. And that relates also to the relationship we have with the beneficiary groups that we're working with. And I think some of those values are often difficult to maintain. So one of them is, for me, very important, is a sense of trust. And I think our beneficiaries need to trust us, and we need to be able to trust our beneficiaries. Coming with that also is the idea of transparency, so that we need to be totally honest with our beneficiaries, how we can help them, how we can't help them. And this comes also in relation to Giving Women. Giving Women does not give money. And at the beginning, it was a struggle to make people understand, how can you be a philanthropist and not give money? Of course, each of our members give their money in the way that they want to give it, but the organization itself does not give money, because we identified that it was really, there were other needs that some of these organizations needed. And our members had a lot to offer in terms of expertise, their time, often mentoring, practical knowledge, and that often was needed as much as money. Often the projects that we're working with were not being able to reach the funding that they needed because there were issues around their organizational structures, their governance, their messaging, the way they were writing project proposals. And that's where we came in to get them ready to be able then to go and get the funding. So I think which brings me to the next point, everybody can be a philanthropist. We don't necessarily have to have big bank accounts. We can be a philanthropist because every single one of us has something to offer. And that comes in our knowledge, sharing life experience. Sometimes we underestimate how our own life experience can help to a program that is struggling around a particular issue. So I think for me, that's one of the things that I really feel through Giving Women is the democratization of philanthropy, of making philanthropy accessible to everybody. The other thing I think that's very important is that relationship with our beneficiaries. As a philanthropist, we need to respect our beneficiaries. We need to listen to our beneficiaries. We do not necessarily have the answers. Our role is to help them to find their own answers. So listening and really trying to understand the context in which these organizations are working is essential to helping them to get to the right place. So I think that for me is respect, trust, transparency, respect, compassion. And then recently I wrote a post, somebody re-quoted it to me, and I had even forgotten that I'd written it. And they said, "Oh, I'm quoting what you wrote." I said, "What did I write?" And what I always say is when you get all those things together and in place, then the money comes. So I think that's where I'll stop now, but this is how I'm sort of adding, I agree completely with Sophie. So I don't want to repeat what Sophie has said. I just feel that I'm adding the other aspect to those points.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much, Atalanti. You've answered some of the questions that I had, which was around like how can philanthropists give support beyond money, and you've kind of explained that you can do that through skills and skill sharing within the organization. And you also talked about your values. So in terms of like, would that be like a philanthropy compass? How would you advise someone who's starting out in giving to kind of find those values and establish those values? But what would you recommend to them? Like, it can be quite a daunting world to start giving. You don't know where to start. So there's two parts of questions of that. One is, what advice would you give for someone starting? But also, how would you find those values or that philanthropy compass that you've already found yourself? And that question I'd say to Sophie and Atalanti.
You want me to start, or?
Yeah, go ahead, Sophie. Yeah.
Sure. Okay. Well, you're right, Taban. I see it in my own personal journey. It's quite difficult to know where to start and how to start. Maybe here I want to make a difference that I think is important between what I call heart philanthropy and impact philanthropy. I think any giving starts from the heart, and that's amazing, and we should embrace that and keep that. But I think it's our responsibility to move towards something that is more impactful and more strategic. I mean, Swiss people give quite a lot. 67% of Swiss people give, on average, 500 Swiss francs a year. And let's make sure we transform that into something that really has good results. The other thing is, we're trying to fundraise at Gift. And when I speak to people, I always get the same comments. Yes, we give. No, we don't give enough. And when I ask why, three things come repeatedly over and over again. Number one, trust. People talk about philanthropic scandals. They talk about overhead costs. Well, all of these things can be mitigated by a good in-depth due diligence process on the organization itself. The second argument they give is what I call the drop in the ocean syndrome. People think you cannot make a difference. And I actually spent quite a bit of time before launching Gift researching this, understanding, can we make a difference? And the news is there and it's positive, and yes, we can, by choosing the right organizations. We've proven it in the past. I mean, extreme poverty has gone, from 32% of the population in the 1990s to 9.2% this year. We know how to intervene and we know how to make a difference. And then the third argument people give is time. There, unfortunately, I don't have a lot of, it's true, it takes a lot of time because there are so many organizations out there and it's not easy to find those that do good better. And if you don't have time, maybe you will later, but if you don't have today, then I think people can look at organizations like ours that commit to a more professional and strategic philanthropy. In terms of, or Atalanti, you want to go for that first?
No, go on.
No, I mean, for me, in terms of compass, Atalanti summarized it very well. It starts with the belief and value, and then you use those beliefs and value as your North Star to guide you towards the journey, to guide you in the journey towards better results. At GIFT, we had initially so many passions, so many outcomes, so many causes that we wanted to address. And we decided to focus on one of our beliefs, which was what I mentioned earlier. You think you are where you are because you've made the right choices and you've taken the right decisions. Well, I think with time comes some maturity, and you realize that if you are where you are, a lot of it has been decided on the day you were born. And we felt at GIFT that we could try and change that by addressing that specific belief. And that is what has led to our mission.
Yeah. Brilliant. Atalanti, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think that, first of all, the drop in the ocean is one that I think is very interesting. I hear this so often as well. Oh, well, what difference can we actually make? And I think that's, for me, one that I can answer. You can make a difference, even if you're not involved in a big philanthropic organization or you're not working at it. Philanthropy is it's a love of humanity. So if you just help an individual near you, it will make a difference. And then when you have the time, you can grow that. I think the other thing, how do you begin your journey? And I think it's very much overwhelming. And one of the things I really don't underestimate is talking to other people, talking to people who are in the same work as you and getting advice. I talk to a lot of people. I'm very open. It's something that I really, because I feel that I learn every time I speak to somebody, they teach me something, and I learn, and I'm doing something a little bit better because those conversations move you. And so this sharing of knowledge for me is a very, very important part of the philanthropic journey. Don't go it alone. Going alone, you get stuck. You only have a single vision. But so many times I have an idea, I think of something, and then somebody will say, but have you thought of it like this? And I think, yeah, that's right. I didn't have that. And so it's constantly learning, constantly opening the way that we're looking at things at Giving Women, how we learn all the time. So for me, it's ask questions. Don't be afraid to ask questions. And none of us, when we started our journey, really knew anything. And as time goes on, we acquire more knowledge, and then we recognize that we did some things wrong. And making mistakes is fine because we learn through and it's never really mistakes. It's learning. It's part of our learning journey. So I would say sharing, exchanging knowledge, talking to people is really, really the most helpful thing. The other thing I didn't talk about, and I think is one that I recognize, we are talking a lot about the relationship of the donor. Are you going to ask us about this, or should I talk about it now? I don't remember.
You can talk about it. It's okay. I will.
So it's always this. We talk about the power relationship. You have the donor, the person with the money, who has essentially a power is money, and you have the beneficiaries who need that money. And one of the things I hear over and over again, and I have one of my daughters is working for a grant-giving foundation, and she's constantly struggling with this issue of where are they telling me what's really happening, or are they telling me the things that they think I want to hear? And that's why I keep coming back to the need for trust on both sides. And how do you give that trust? I think, and that's, I think, part of also the philanthropic journey, is sitting down and saying, we want the same thing. We want your beneficiaries to get where we've identified together. So it's a common goal. We have this common goal that we want our beneficiaries to get to this point. How can we best do this? And then you kind of try and break down those barriers. Those barriers, the truth is, are always going to be there. The truth is that if you have the money, you have the strength. But I think if we have those open conversations, which are transparent and where there isn't judgment, and that's one of the things I didn't mention, is judgment. We mustn't judge. And that's the most difficult thing. I'm a parent of 3 children, grandchildren, and I know people say to me, how did you maintain that great relationship with your kids? And I said, one of the most difficult things is not to judge them. But if you can do that, then the communications stay open. And I think it's the same thing in terms of the relationship of donor to beneficiary.
Brilliant, thank you. I think I'd like to add a little bit into the drop in the ocean, because I started the Lotus Flower in my living room with absolutely no money, and Vianne was the only person that we had on the ground when we started. And we started off with one project. Do you remember, Vianne? Sewing Sisters. And now it's grown into an organization that has 30 staff members on the ground with 4 centers, and we've impacted, I'd say, 24,000 women and girls directly. So it's really, really grown. And that was mainly around knowing that if I started small and picked something small and did something and took action, then something would happen. And I think for me, the greatest action has been, I've not been able to do it without Vianne on the ground. Vianne, I'd like to bring you in. It would be really, really interesting to hear your perspective and, as a local direct implementer of the projects, to kind of talk about that a little bit and maybe cover some obstacles that may have stopped you from delivering the best impacts or made it more difficult. Can you kind of cover that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Taban. Actually, nothing has really stopped us from doing our work and serving those in need. We have been through different obstacles and challenges on the ground, but we have always found ways to move it around and to find proper solutions. Indeed, in a context like Iraq and maybe many other countries in the Middle East, where it's continuously exposed to war and conflict, the humanitarian mission is not an easy task, neither for us nor for the other humanitarian workers. Some of the challenges that I would like to highlight that we as local organizations face include lack of sustainable funding. This sustainable funding that supports more strategic projects of that organization. The majority of the funding that's being given to local organizations on the ground is for short period programs, and that does not guarantee the continuation of that NGO work. There is also the supply of this funding is not always fair for all organizations. I do believe that local organizations need more support, need more strategic and more sustainable funding, which helps them to grow sustainably and be less reliant. We have to also understand that there has to be these fundings that's been given to local organizations should also cover admin costs, which are very difficult to be covered locally because we don't have other sources of funding like unrestricted funding. There is also another issue on the ground, especially in the Muslim countries, where the majority of donations from the people themselves goes to zakat. And in zakat, people do not necessarily donate it to NGOs or donate it to humanitarian workers. They prefer to do it themselves, and they prefer it to go as a cash assistance to those in need, not to go through programs like mental health, education, and others. This has been one of the issues that we as local implementers in Muslim countries are facing, but it's really good that it's starting to change step by step in the past few years, and people are starting to give some small donations donations to NGOs as well, and understanding that these NGOs are leaving a great impact on the lives of those in need. Another challenge that I would like to highlight is about donors themselves. Sometimes the due diligence process and the requirements of the donors locally are very strict and complex to be addressed by some local organizations, especially those that are grassroots or small local NGOs. These requirements, sometimes these NGOs cannot address them because of the lack of capacity or lack of skills they have. And I do believe that one of the main missions of any donor coming to such countries should be building the capacities of these local organizations and not looking at them only as implementers, because implementation itself really needs a lot of resources and a lot of skills as well. There is also another issue that that's related to the donor as well, is a lack of context, as my colleagues reflected on it, lack of knowledge about the context by some of the donors. Some of the donors do not really understand the social, religious, and cultural norms that exist in the country, and this is why in some of the call for proposals, some of the thematic areas does not really match with these norms, or if some of them does, then it is sometimes very difficult to be achieved because of the complexity of the current socio-political issues in Iraq and other countries that are not very helpful or supportive to the achievement of many objectives that are being set by donors. We also have issues that with the donor themselves. We also have issues around lack of knowledge of the context. I reflected on that. We also have issues. Let me go back to spending. As local NGOs, we spend a lot of time and effort in making a lot of proposals, a lot of applications from many donors, and sometimes we receive no feedbacks on any of this application. We do understand that it's very difficult for donors to give feedbacks for every local organization who are applying for funding, but sometimes there is one specific organization that applies for every call from a specific donor, and they do not give, and all of these applications were not successful, and they haven't been receiving any feedback. And I think in such situation, those organizations really deserve a feedback. So these are some of the challenges that we face when in regard to the philanthropy, in regard to the donors themselves. There are also issues around the beneficiaries themselves. Sometimes we request is the needs of beneficiaries themselves. Sometimes as local implementers and local NGOs, we are being put in a very difficult position when we stand between the needs and requests of the people and those asked by the donor themselves, which might not be similar. Some in many situations are very different because donors follow their own priorities, while people ask for something very different. And this comes, this is linked to my last point about lack of knowledge about service themselves among the people, among those people who are in need locally. So we do have soft services and we do have abstract services, and people do not really understand the importance of soft services like psychosocial support, awareness raising activities, mental health support. So as a local organization like Lotus Flower, every time we need to spend efforts and time in explaining the importance of service itself even before implementing it, because the majority of the people we serve really prefer the abstract services. They would like to receive a food basket, cash assistance, or anything that's physical, that's touchable. They see it, they touch it, but they ignore the importance. They have ignorance about the importance of the soft services itself. We have been quite successful in addressing these issues on the ground. We're talking to the people, we're consulting the people, and highlighting some success stories of those in need who have been part of such programming of Lotus Flower, and ensure that people understand how much these people have improved through their participation in different programming. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Vian. I guess it's the flexibility and approach is very, very important. I'd like to come to Sophie and ask you, why do you think philanthropy should focus on outcomes and not overheads? Like, what would be, especially after listening to the obstacles that Vian kind of has highlighted, what would be your response to that?
Well, it's very simple. I think overhead is just the wrong metric to focus on. I mean, if you take an organization that has a 10% overhead and one that has a 20%, it'd be very foolish to think that the one that has 10% is more efficient. It doesn't mean anything. Maybe they have such thin admin costs that they cannot deliver the program properly, or they can't gather the data to check that the beneficiaries are actually happy with the programs. So I don't look at overhead. You know, any good company, whether in the commercial world or in the philanthropic world, needs overhead to function. I mean, philanthropy at the end of the day is all about human capital, and you need to identify the talented and engaged people, and you know, there's no miracle. You need to pay those people. So, and it comes back to the point I made earlier, which is one of the key principles that we have, is the unrestricted funding. You know, we wouldn't know how to transform the lives. So I think it's as when I hear Vianne talk, I really realize how important it is. And that's one of the things that I was very attracted to fund the Lotus Flower and be part of their journeys, because the beneficiaries are the center of the organization. Their program is designed to meet the specific needs of the beneficiaries. And that's what we need to focus on. We need to let the organization decide how to use the funding, and if that's overhead because they want to build scalability and capability, so be it. That's great. So all about unrestricted funding, and just don't focus on overhead.
Brilliant, thank you. And also, Vianne kind of touched on how it's quite hard for, you know, in terms of local organizations need capacity building. But I guess as a philanthropist and doing due diligence and choosing charities to support and organizations to support, this is a question to both of you, Atalanti and Sophie. How would you find charitable organizations to support? Like, what's your process in picking them?
So we have quite a rigorous process at Giving Women. And part of that rigor is around where we see we can make a difference. So so that's an important part, because, you know, not all, you know, we have organizations who come and all they're looking for is funding. And we say, no, this isn't what we do. There are other organizations to do that. But I think the point about, Sophie, what you were saying, you know, about the cost of overhead, this is not something that we actually ever look at, because we recognize that operational costs are really important. I would say that for us, a red flag is an organization that is run entirely by volunteers. So for us, that is unsustainable. It's something that has a short life. It often could suffer from what I call founder syndrome, because there's one, you know, charismatic person who runs it. It's all done by volunteers, and one day that's not going to, it's not sustainable. So for me, seeing a really robust organizational structure supporting the work on the ground is really, really important. So I think that for us is, and when there isn't that, and yet what they're doing is really good, we will come in and say, okay, I think you need to change this. I think you need, and people are very, you know, small organizations in particular, are scared to put in salaries. You know, oh, I can't put a salary in because, you know, then, you know, the funders won't fund me because I'm using money to live. And I said, well, how can you do your job if you can't, if you're not paid? So for us, that's also, and that's where I think that there's a lot of education to go as well with the projects, with the project themselves. They have to feel comfortable and recognize that, you know, having a strong organizational structure where people are properly paid, where they can live from it, means that this organization is going to carry on, it's going to last. You know, people aren't going to have to drop off because they can't afford to stay there. So for me, for us, that's a really, really big red flag. If it's only run by volunteers, we're really not, it's not something that we would look at. The other thing is for us also very important is, and it really goes to what Vianne is saying and what Lotus Flower does, and I'm very proud to say that Lotus Flower is one of the Giving Women project circles, that we we see that a lot of the people that are working on the project are local people that come from their own community, that understand exactly what Vian was saying, understand the context, understand the social norms, understand what needs to be worked at, but also understand how to do that in a way that, coming from outside, we don't have necessarily those sensitivities. So that for me is also something that I look for, that the local community is engaged with the program. So I think those are, again, relate very much to this idea of trust, this idea of listening. All the things I talked about are kind of echoed in the way that we look at for our projects. And of course, understanding that there is accountability. And I think this is where the tension really happens, where you understand that for a small project, having a heavy monitoring and evaluation process is adding such a weight to the project. At the same time, you cannot not have some sort of accountability, because accountability is not for the donor so much, but actually for the project on the ground, being able to identify what things are not going well, what are the things we need to really change and adjust to ensure that we're really going to reach. So I think that finding that balance where you recognize that you're not doing the monitoring and evaluation to answer to your donors, but rather to see how you can improve the program to get to the objectives that you're trying to reach.
Brilliant, thank you. Sophie, would you like to add to that?
I mean, you know, Atalanti has summarized it super well. I mean, for us, we're fairly new to this, and most of our sourcing of organizations that are now in our portfolio come from networking, but also a lot of things are online nowadays. There's also a lot of research available, you know, that we looked at upfront, understanding effective altruism, understanding which intervention makes sense. Giving Women, actually, I have to mention it here, has been a great source of inspiration for us. I mean, I met Taban at a human trafficking webinar organized by Giving Women in November 2020. And I was drawn to you, Taban, and to your organization for 3 reasons. And these are 3, I'll mention them quickly because these are 3 key reasons and key things we look at the organization. Number 1 was the mission alignment. Super important to have the same mission and the same value as the organization you support. Number 2 was the strong leadership. I've said it, it's all about human capital, and I saw in you, Taban, a great leader. And then the last thing is the impact-driven approach. As Atalanti mentioned, you know, beneficiaries are at the center of the Lotus Flower. And these are key criteria. I mean, there are many more when we go into depth in our in-depth due diligence process, but it's these kind of things we focus on.
Brilliant, thank you so much for that. I guess, so we've kind of gone into impact and performance a little bit. It would be interesting to hear from you, Vian. How has like data and impact played a role in like the Lotus Flower? I know it's something that we kind of value internally, but you can like give examples of I don't know, during COVID, or how did we address it, and how do we kind of address impact, and what's it used for, and how does it help us and the donors as well?
Yeah, sure. So for us at Lotus Flower, to ensure that you have an accurate data is a crucial part of our work. It has helped us a lot to identify the exact needs of the community we work with, and also think about some innovative solutions or innovative programs that we can implement to address these needs and address these issues that people are facing. In our centers in IDP and refugee camp, I always say that these centers are key bridges between us and the community, because we have a daily consultation with women and girls we work with their families as well, and they do help us to grow Lotus Flower. They do help us to propose new ideas, to propose new innovative programs that can help them and provide sustainable solutions for the issues they face in their lives and in displacement. During COVID-19, you mentioned that we were unable to work in our centers, and the majority of local organizations were unable to do that as well because of COVID. The majority of those camps were closed, and NGO works were stopped. So we had to stay home for almost 3 months and work remotely with these people. We set up our online centers where we conducted some activities with the people we serve. But the first thing we did when we were back to our centers was doing an assessment with very limited human resource capacities that we have on the ground and very limited support that Lotus Flower has. We did assessment in refugee and IDP camps to measure the impact of this pandemic on the lives of people, especially when it comes to the rise of gender-based violence, early marriage, economical hardships, and also mental health issues that they face. And then we drafted a very good report. We distributed the reports among all the UN agencies and other humanitarian workers. And the feedbacks, we received very positive feedbacks that many organizations have really take it as a reference for the future intervention, and also helped us to know what we can do to address the issues that people have been facing, especially during COVID. So yes, data has been very important for us, has been one of the main reasons why we really try to be very innovative in the solutions that we provide to address different needs of these communities we work with.
Brilliant, thank you. So I guess a question to Atalanti and Sophie in different ways. For Sophie, it would be collaborating with other philanthropists, and also with Atalanti, with the women in Giving Women, the philanthropists, and skill sharing. How do you do this? How easy or how hard is it to get people on board to help you with that mission?
I can start if you want, Taban. I mean, collaboration amongst philanthropists sounds great. I think I'm all for it. We need more of it. You know, in Switzerland, there are 13,000 foundations. In theory, we should do it because we all dare to do good. And, you know, there's no point reinventing the wheels. In practice, it happens not often enough. There are more initiatives, you know, donor collaborative platforms. I mean, Co-Impact is a great example of large philanthropies coming together to really focus on some specific impact that they want to have. For us, it's easy because we come at this table with a beginner's mindset. We don't have rules or guidelines or old mission that was given to us. And it's one of the reasons that we chose to work with Swiss Philanthropy Foundation, because I think umbrella foundation have a role to play here. They host many funds, and they should put them together. The first financing we did, the first giving we did, was actually a co-funding with another fund from SPF. So it does work, but we need to see a lot more of it to leverage the impact everyone can have. It's a win-win for all of us, but it's proven more difficult than the theory tells.
Yeah. Atalanti, and then I'll go on to a question that was asked, which I think is quite relevant to this as well. If you can add.
I think that philanthropy is shifting and moving towards greater collaboration. And as Sophie said, with GIFT, with Co-Impact now, the people are recognizing if we join our forces, we do things in a more effective and impactful way. But I think philanthropy has also suffered from having been, you know, identified with people's personality, leaving a legacy. You know, this is my philanthropic foundation, and I want to do it this way. And you know, there's a kind of territorial mindset that used to exist, which I think is really, really shifting now. Really, and I think people are starting to recognize, you know, philanthropy isn't about the philanthropist, it's about what we can do and how we can change things. In terms of Giving Women, as I said, we're a small organization. We have a membership of just over about 150 women, growing. The reason we founded this organization was we recognized that there were a lot of women out there who really wanted to start their philanthropic journey, didn't necessarily have means. Some of them did have means, some of them ran their own foundations or had their own foundations. But what we identified, and I hate doing this, but the women do give slightly differently than men. There is a comfort. They like to work together. They like to share their experiences. And so there is that interest in co-giving, co-working, working together. There is that comfort and that openness to really sharing one's experience with other people so that you can get to better impact. And so I think what I'm hoping, and I think that's something that we'll see in the next generation, that people are recognizing it's not so much about me doing what I'm doing, but rather the impact of what we're doing. But it has been a very kind of ego-centered kind of world. And I think that's been a problem. And but I'm seeing that changing. I really do see that change and that desire for greater collaboration. And I have a mantra, which I can say now, which everybody's heard who knows me. But I think, this whole idea of the drop in the ocean, I do believe very strongly in the power of one. Each one of us can make a difference in some way or another. But we were writing our impact report. And with my daughter, and we were talking about, well, what can we say? How does it reflect? This doesn't only reflect. And she came up with we do believe in the power of one, but the magic of many. And I think that is really important to keep that in mind, that if we open up, talk about what we're doing, talk about our difficulties, talk about our successes, share them with other people, that's really going to move things forward in a much, much faster way. So I think we need advocates. We need to talk about this and really push this as a reality. And there's some really great players in that right now.
Brilliant. It makes me think about Melinda French Gates and Mackenzie Scott and how they've kind of teamed up to support women's empowerment and put like £1 billion towards supporting women's empowerment. And actually the way that they've started giving, it's very, very new. Do you have any thoughts on that or something you'd like to say, Atalanti and Sophie?
I know there's a lot of, that people say, oh, well, wait, we were talking about the way that they're giving. And a couple of organizations that I know have been beneficiaries. But, the general public say, oh, we'll see how effective they are. And I think that what people don't know is how much due diligence goes into their giving. They do all the work ahead of time. And I think that they feel so confident about the organizations which they've done a lot of due diligence about. They feel that these are really great beneficiaries, that thing of trust. We'll give you the money, but we have trust in the way that you're going to do it. And I think that for me, the way that they're giving, and particularly Scott McKenzie, was really, she was showing she really believed in this organization. She had total trust. So she's not asking either for reporting. There's no reporting. She doesn't ask them to tell her where they're spending the money, apparently. It's just, okay, now we really believe in you. Take this money and do what's best for the program. And I think that's kind of really interesting. And I think that's going to be a real shift.
Yeah. Sophie, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, it is incredible. I've got a small personal anecdote on this whole impact and evaluation. I went to South Africa on a site visit for my due diligence, and I had a nice piece of paper in my pocket with 6 KPIs, key performance indicators, that I wanted the organization to send to me biannually. Well, I spent a day and a half with that organization and never got that piece of paper out of my pocket because it made sense in front of my computer back in Switzerland, but actually made no sense on their day-to-day activities. And Vian touched about this. It's, yes, impact is a great buzzword. I mean, I use it all the time, and I think we need to thrive to measure the long-term impact. But people's lives are very complex. And one shouldn't forget about that. And the example that Mackenzie Scott gives is true. We also believe that in GIFT, that you need to do your work upfront and then you need to trust the organization. And impact measurement, for sure, but for the organization, by the organization. There is no point gathering data to please a donor. That's just a waste of time and energy.
Brilliant. Yeah. Vian, I guess I'll ask you as well. As someone on the ground directly working with the women and girls that we support, what's the difference, and how different does it feel when you have a donor that actually trusts you to do the job, as opposed to a donor that tells you what they want to do? What's
Well,
the
honestly, yeah, so actually the difference is huge, because the one who trusts you will not ask for a lot of requirements, a lot of documents, a lot of monthly documents that need either financial or narrative that needs to be shared with them, and they know that this is a lot of pressure on a small team, like in a small organization. They trust you, they just give the money, they know that you're doing a great work. They sometimes ask for some photos that they can use for their social media with the consent of those people in a photo or a video, and that's all. And it's all about a final financial narrative reporting, where we can provide for them with the evidences that this project has been implementing successfully with these beneficiaries. While those who do not actually trust is simply putting a lot of pressure on a very small team, and they already know that they are doing the work properly, but they just do it. They just maybe follow some of their internal requirements, their diligence requirements that they need to do, which is fine for us as well. It is challenging, but we try to address them as much as possible.
Yeah, I think it's also like there's a lot of the systems, so it's not the donor, it's the organizations and systems that kind of need to be changed. So we've got a question here from Lisa, and I'd encourage everyone listening in, if you can ask your questions in the chat, because we're closing up soon and I'd like to get everyone's questions in, so if you put them in the chat and I can kind of get through them. We've got a question from Lisa. Thank you so much for the awareness of how multi-year unrestricted funding can make a true difference, and how M&E is the most effective when used for learning. Thank you for being donors that get this. Yes, it's a massive, it's music to every organization's ears when you have supportive donors. And Lisa's question is, how do you get more donors to understand this? Like, how would you spread the message out and get other donors to understand the way that you're working? I'll go to Atalanti first and then Sophie.
So I think that it's exactly what I say. We need to keep talking to each other. We need to be creative. We did actually, Giving Women did a panel discussion on funding for women-run, women-focused organization, because it is an area which is difficult. And we had somebody who was running a program in Cambodia, and she was our speakers were quite militant almost in the way that they were talking. And she said that she actually will refuse money from what she called bad donors, and who were putting, things in place were totally irrelevant to the growth of the program, to enjoying the program. But to get to that point, you need to have, she says, but now I couldn't do it. She said 10 years ago when I was starting out, I couldn't refuse money. But recently I heard somebody else say to me, no, it's you, who said to me, yes, I turned away money because the restrictions that were put in place. So I think that what we need to do, and people like myself, we need to go out there and keep talking about it and keep speaking about it, making it known, and talk to our colleagues who are grantors, and just making this something that is really the forefront. But it's going to take time, but I think the more we talk about it, and we have good reasons. I think it's not enough just to say, but we have really good reason. We're not saying don't evaluate. We're not saying don't have a look at what you're doing, but the purpose is for learning, for improving the program. As Sophie said, not to please the donor. That's not going to work. So I think it's just a matter of keeping these kind of conversations going all the time.
Yeah, definitely. And also I think, when we're involved in this kind of work, we're committed to the mission. And so for us, especially at Lotus Flower, we're very committed to the impact that we make and direct impact. And so for us, the data and the impacts that we use are not just for donors, but also for ourselves and learning. Yeah, I think it was me, Atalanti.
Yeah, it was you.
I turned away $500,000, which is unthinkable, but $500,000, it was a question of, we know we work directly on the ground. We know the correct information. We know what the beneficiaries want. We know the political situation, the political stability. If you want us to move into a different region, part of the region, and we know it's not going to work in that way that you've outlined, we will walk away from the money, because we know it won't have a greater impact. Something will trip up along the line. And actually, I'm glad I turned it away, because several months later there was conflict in the region that they wanted to do it in. So but that only comes with having that confidence and experience to sit down, and that trust from other donors.
But I think also, and it's one of the things that came up in our panel discussion, was that on the one hand, we need to educate the donors. On the other hand, we also need to educate the organizations, the projects, because I've heard many projects saying, well, we adjusted our program so we could fit in with the donors' view. And that, again, we need to educate and say, no, you can't do that. If you really believe what you're doing is right, you're just going to stay by it and the money will come. But it's really hard, because it's so hard to get funding. And I understand why it happens. Yeah. So I think it's an education that has to happen on both ends.
Definitely.
I mean, I even heard an organization tell me that they're creating projects to get funding.
Yes, you were saying.
Yeah. I just thought, how backward is that? That can't happen. And I mean, I agree with Atalanti. For us, because we're also fundraising and trying to bring other people along in the journey, we have these discussions all the time. It's quite easy to convince people about the multi-year unrestricted funding, because I think it's the only way. It's the only way that philanthropy can actually achieve the results it's trying to achieve. So it's all about discussing and listening to what people have to say. And then you'll get there.
Definitely. Also going back to your statement, Atalanti, we've currently, with the Ukraine war, we've been put in a situation of, are you going to move? Are you going to go to Poland to set up a center? Are you going? And actually for us, the way that we work, even when we started Lotus in Northern Iraq, Kurdistan, it was after ISIS, but it wasn't the immediate humanitarian emergency assistance. That's when all the other organizations go in, they do the food, shelter, support, safety. And then we're the long term. We went in when everyone left. So for us, to make that decision, we really had to think, what is the most suitable way that we can have impact, not just for Ukrainian refugees, but for everyone. So for us, that solution came in the form of setting up a centre in London. So we are looking to set up a centre to support women and girls in London. But again, we didn't want to be driven by donors. We had lots of donors saying, are you going to go into Poland and do something? And it didn't feel right at the time, and in the context and the timing of where we are now. Okay, let's see if we have some more questions. I know I had a private question come to me, which was, how did I set up the Lotus Flower with such limited funding? I'm going to try and do this very quickly. It was very hard. I'm not going to lie. I had to learn the whole world of funding. I didn't realize organizations or people had money to give. This is how new it was to me. But eventually, when I realized, we managed to get the support of one donor who really, really believed in us. And that was from previous track record of working with a charity. And they donated towards one project. And me and Vianne knew that with that project, we really had to prove the need and how we closed the circle. So it wasn't just a sewing project. We were actually bringing contracts into the camp to make it a full living circle for the women. And then from that, we noticed the spaces were the unique things that the women and girls needed in the camps. So we started implementing more projects, mainly on voluntary basis. And then the second year was, no, we need hires. So we went out and got funding for the hires. It wasn't easy, but I really think for us, the way it worked was trying to show that impact and the direct impact on the lives. And I don't mean just numbers as in how many women we've helped. I mean the stories and how we've actually changed a women and girls' life on the ground. So it's not been easy, and we've had, you know, COVID's impacted us, and the current war, you know, everyone's donations have pivoted towards Ukraine. So we have to constantly pivot towards what's happening in the world and figure out ways to diversify our income. And that's why it's so important to have multi-year unrestricted funding to help organizations become sustainable, especially when your need is so greatly needed on the ground. Any other questions? I'm just checking.
Just to follow up on your decision not to go into Poland, I think it's also a reflective of there are organizations on the ground who know the reality there. For you to go there, it makes no sense, because it's what we were saying with Vian, you need to have the people who understand the context. And I think you made the totally right decision, although some people would say, well, why aren't you there? Why aren't you there? So I think it's so multi-layered.
Yeah. We have a question from Jennifer. What is the initial direction corporate philanthropies need to provide to our partners, especially ones we've worked with for decades, to get to this point of thinking beyond so many programs? It's a great question. Who wants to take that?
Can you repeat that?
So what is the initial direction corporate philanthropies need to provide to our partners, especially ones we've worked with for decades, to get to this point of thinking beyond so many programs? So what I understand from that question is the partners that these corporate organizations are working with, how do they kind of bring them on board not to implement so many programs? Correct me if I'm wrong, Jennifer. Happy to have you on mute and elaborate.
That's right.
on that.
Yeah, because we know some of them we try, you know, we built that with them, even though they're but we keep asking them, okay, how do we build it institutionally? How do we do this? And they keep answering us with just more programs that we know they're just creating just for the partnership. And right, how do we get them to that mindset? We know we as a team are getting there too, but how do we get our partners to that mindset so we can actually have grow impact?
Yeah. Good question. I think that in terms of the corporate partners, I think they need to also go through that philanthropic journey and say, okay, what are they going to focus on? What is it that is aligned with the work? You know, there has to be alignment with their own values, with what they're doing. It has to make sense, and really pare them down to a clarity about where they want to give. Because I think often it's kind of, they keep adding things, and then you lose the sense of purpose of the corporate partner. I think, you know, they have to go through a philanthropic journey.
Great, thank you. I think we've run out of time. Quickly, shall we get quick snippets of advice from Atalanti and Sophie? We'll keep it short. Just before, so advice to anyone wanting to give and how they should start. I mean, what would you say in a few words?
Yeah, I would say, if this is something you really want to do and start your philanthropic journey, just ask around you. There's always somebody there that's ready to help you through that.
I mean, for my part, we're quite new, so I don't think I should sit here and give advice to people. But what I'll say is take the first step. Take the first step. Giving makes you happy. I'm quite a geek when it comes to research, and there's so much scientific research about why giving makes you happy. And I think, try and have a strategy, speak to people, as Atalanti say. Don't focus on projects, focus on organizations, give long, flexible, patient, unrestricted funding. And that's by doing these kind of things that I think philanthropy can really address all the challenges that we're facing in today's world.
Brilliant. Thank you. Vian, do you have any quick last minute words?
Yeah, I will just add that we'll tell them, please come and see projects yourself. Please come and see them firsthand, because this will make you knowledgeable about the context, about what things are happening on the ground and how they are happening. And this will help you to be more innovative in the solutions you provide to different issues.
Brilliant, thank you. And PK has said, give financially, expertise, mentorship and storytelling or marketing support. Definitely. Capacity building is definitely an important area. So thank you so much. I mean, thank you so much for the wonderful panel, for joining us. Thank you for the participants for joining. We hope you've enjoyed listening to the discussion. I mean, I personally think behind every successful grant and charitable support is a smart strategy. And I'm just very grateful to get everyone's views on this panel and to be able to have this wonderful discussion. If anyone wants to follow up with any organization or any of the panelists, please do get in touch with us. You can get in touch with Anna at thelotusflower.org and we will connect you. We might send you a follow-up email as well, just to thank you, and just in case anyone wants to connect on for any reason, we're happy to connect you with any of the panelists as well. Brilliant. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for
Thanks,
giving us
everyone.
this opportunity. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for joining. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's go to 54. Shall I leave?
Let's say hello to Ruth.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody. That was great. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks all.
Thank you, Taban. Well done.
Weekend.
Thank
Bye.
you, Atlanti. Thank you, Sophie.
Thanks,
Thanks,
thanks, Jan. You were great.
That's great.
Thanks, Taban.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thanks.
Everyone. Bye.
Bye, Anna. Thanks.
Bye. Have a good weekend. Bye.
You too. Bye.